Waiting. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're live. You do this all the time. You go YouTube live. You're like the YouTube live veteran. Jared Yates Sexton, welcome. I feel very honored and privileged to have you here live.
Are we live? I don't know if we've stressed that. Wait, we're live right now? The people can see?
Don't you do this like when bourbon night? Didn't you?
Yeah,
don't you do this regularly? Yeah.
I do. I just like the hype of it. We're live right now. Anything could happen, Pete.
Well, I like to raise the stakes, and I want my guests to be really nervous about going on such a high-profile program.
I'm on the hot seat. Oh, let's both.
I said high-profile program while I held up my 11th hour with Stephanie Rule Cup. I did not mean that, but it seems like I did, and I'll stand by it, I guess.
I love it. Anything could happen right now. We could both drink coffee. We could both talk about the advantages of going live. Literally anything, Pete.
Well, anything could happen, but I like to ask my guests questions about the things that they are paying close attention to, in your case, talking and writing about. But I will give you the opening, because we're live.
We're live?
To answer the first question about anything, about life, about suffering, about finding joy, about anything you want, nature. Ask me something or tell me what you want to share with the folks, because I have a few specific questions for you.
Sure. Actually you touched on a few of them. I was talking to you before we went live. I feel like this is obviously a very strange moment. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger. I feel very clear right now. I feel very motivated. I feel very focused. And you know what's funny about it, Pete? You actually brought up nature. That's one of the things about it is like, I feel like this is a moment of great danger and great importance. But man, has it really made the good things and the replenishing things that much more important. I've been going out in nature a lot more. I'm actually getting ready to go to a cabin for an extended period of time to shut down.
Baby. Very good. For an extended period of time. Look at you.
For an extended period of time. That's what we call in the business self-care. And so
self-care. Look at this.
So I'm very focused on where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I think you have to be able to hold a couple of things in mind at once, which is the seriousness of the moment and also the things that bring you pleasure and joy and basically are self-care. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm doing the same thing. And I think a lot of people are. I think that's what we're doing during the lame duck session, during the time between the election and the inauguration, during the time between the holidays, Thanksgiving, Taint Week, which is the week between Christmas and New Year's where nothing happens. Sorry.
I've never heard it referred to, but we are live. So, I mean, like any reaction to that is...
The thing I've been saying every year on my show for years and years. I try to be live on those days for people.
How is Target not advertising that? How are there not taint sales? Make that happen.
They'll lower their standards in Trump too, because corporate standards are just going to go lower and lower in terms of who they hire and how they market. Like, are there still going to be family values at those stores where they're not going to sell certain books with gay characters or sex in them? No, I mean, it's all going to be kind of patriarchal, I would imagine, if anything. But
yeah, you're going to see. And you know what's funny about that? Like, speaking of it, like the capitulation that's already taking place before the second Trump administration.
Yeah, we should name who and which entities. We should keep a list of who's capitulated. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it would be easier right now to talk about who hasn't capitulated. But you brought up Target, and it's actually interesting to talk about that, Pete, because we need to point out how many corporations have just absolutely used progressivism and tolerance and diversity as sort of a selling point. They didn't really care about any of this. Of course, we saw Target start to back away from sort of queer marketing and LGBTQ marketing. But like, also, there was a period. I don't. Do you go to Target? Have you ever actually stepped foot in Target?
Often I do. There's one near me, and their berries in groceries are cheaper, much cheaper. And so I try to go to the local, but sometimes I go there for certain things. So the point is, yes, I go there often, I would say.
I'm sure you noticed this, and probably your listeners did as well. I'm
a Red Circle member.
Oh, you get the rewards.
I'm just saying.
I pressed skip on that, but that's neither here nor there. But like when you go into Target and you would even see the advertisements, like you would see like plus size models, you would see diverse models, you would see like LGBTQ models. That type of stuff is going to go away because a large part of it, of course, was marketing. But the capitulation is both going to be out in the open with people like John Fetterman and Sidney Blumenthal and all of these, but the corporations that have been doing this for a while, it's going to become readily apparent who is getting on board with this and who is going to go ahead and back off because of what's happening.
So everybody is referring to Timothy Snyder, but he's not the only person in who is an expert on autocracy and authoritarianism. Of course, you've written a lot about it, but just talk about your view of what we're hearing, which is what is it referred to, that capitulation, the kissing of the ring, the bending of the knee. It's being called different things, but why is that a bad thing? What does history say about those individuals who do it and those companies and corporations who do it as well?
Well, I want to introduce everybody listening to a term that they need to become familiar with, which is quisling. And that is a group of people who are more than happy to work with authoritarians as things start to move. One of the problems, and this is what I've been screaming about for years now, was that everybody wanted to say Trump was an aberration and like he was going to get rejected. We were going to move on. The Overton window of this country has moved towards the right. The 2024 election proved that in a variety of ways. And one of the things I don't think people were able to wrap their heads around is that basically from 2016 up to 2024, there was a period of time in which there was a lot of money to be made by making these gestures of quote unquote resistance. And, you know, I wasn't shocked that one of the first people to do this was Joe Scarborough. And of course, we've seen from the New York Times, we've seen from the Washington Post. Don't forget, people, democracy dies in the darkness. All of this stuff was a gesture towards a demographic marketing, which was the idea that you could get a bunch of people who oppose Donald Trump to pay money for products that then sort of communicated that resistance. But it wasn't real. It was basically making people feel better and like they were spending their money on something that was going to somehow or another make things different. Meanwhile, our culture and our politics continue to move towards the right. And what's happening now is we're seeing within the Democratic Party, within liberal spheres, and history shows us this is what happens. The white middle class always gets caught between these things, and most often they will end up moving towards the right, especially as their own positions start to get more and more precarious.
Well, all very interesting, well explained. Quisling, by the way, I looked that up. It's named after Vidkun Quisling, the former Minister of Defense of Norway. He was a Nazi collaborator who nominally headed the government of Norway during the country's occupation by Nazi Germany. Quisling, a traitor who collaborates with an enemy force occupying their country. You mentioned the Overton window moved to the right. Let me challenge you on that because, of course, I think there's an easy way to say that it did and a way that you could be right saying that. But the way I look at it, I look at how American public opinion is on a wide range of issues. And when they're polled and when they're asked and when those ideas, solutions, and other things are explained, people overwhelmingly agree with democratic ideas, progressive ideas, as well as what progressives and liberal Democrats think of the role of government. So overwhelmingly, Americans think this about pro-choice, about abortion, and want rules on guns and have feelings about the Supreme Court and voting. Overwhelmingly, when you're explained, when it's not tagged to one party or the other, people come down on progressive ideas and a general feeling of, I don't know if you'd say positiveness, but about the role of government, what it's supposed to do, like recently provide health care for the American people. So while the Overton window seems to have switched in terms of the way people voted, when it comes to how I try to just muddle through explaining how Americans actually feel on issues, aren't we still more likely to side with Democrat, progressive, liberal ideas and issues and laws?
It depends. It gets a little weird here. So, for instance, I think polling, man, you can use polling to prove whatever you want at any given moment. And I think that America is largely in favor of what you would say are democratic appeals or principles. But there are other things that have happened too. So, for instance, like the way that polling changed, whether it was on immigration, which I mean, in 2024, one of the main arguments was who is going to be tougher on immigration, which
Yeah.
should blow people's hair back, that is where it ended up happening. A large
With the hair jokes.
well, you and I, as follically challenged men, I think it's okay.
Blows
It's
your
live,
beard
Pete.
back to hear that. The immigration issue, of course, which frustrates the hell out of me, simply because the solution for that is comprehensive immigration reform, which is a raft of laws that would do a wide range of things. And Republicans and Democrats have agreed on that and tried to pass it many times. But either a Republican-led House or a former president stops those laws from happening. That's what you need to fix immigration. Democrats have wanted to do that. They've tried to do that. Republicans won't let them do that because they want to keep it an issue. Rant is over.
Yeah, that's what happens whenever you meet on the rhetorical battlefield of the Republican Party's choosing. And quite frankly, like, what you're talking about is a feedback loop that we've seen. So, for instance, the New York Times is a permission structure generator. So, for instance, what did we hear on gay and trans things for forever? Right? The right liberal position was, yeah, we should have tolerance, but maybe they're going too far. You know, the quote unquote left, which doesn't exist in the United States of America, they're just as dangerous as MAGA. So basically, what happens is that middle, that moderate, starts to move further and further to the right, particularly as market conditions necessitate. So yes, people are going to say, I agree with this and I support this. But if there's not a robust agenda or a push to get those things done that also goes ahead and pairs with the economic conditions that everybody exists within, which are not good. It doesn't matter how good you say the quote unquote economy is. It's not. The actual existence within the United States and around liberal democracies that are crumbling right now, it's getting worse. So what happens is you have a group of people, and I got a lot of flack for this for years. I started to notice in conversations with liberals, and I started to notice in the way things were being framed, that things were moving towards the right. And, you know, people didn't want to sit with that because there were a lot of gestures and a lot of talking about what people thought about, but there wasn't fighting for it. That was the issue. So what has effectively happened is that the United States of America has entered a pseudo environment in which people say, yeah, I want all of those things. But meanwhile, they're becoming more and more comfortable with authoritarianism and Trumpism, which we're seeing right now. It's a very weird, bewildering time, but it makes sense when you actually look at the bigger picture.
I think you said the left doesn't exist in America. Did I hear you right?
Yes, that's correct.
What do you mean by that?
Well, there are people. So, for instance, I'm a proud leftist, but I don't have any representation in government. Basically, what we have within the United States in the political paradigm is a center left to far right paradigm. And basically, since World War II, and this, we don't have enough time to get into it, the left, whether it's labor unions or people with social democratic ideals or whatever, they were hunted down, they were killed, they were neutralized and marginalized. So when you actually take a look at political conversations, they never touch on this stuff. You never get the solutions that the left would give you. They're considered dangerous or extreme, and they're never given any type of actual traction. So what we've actually found, Pete, and you talked about those polls and what people believe, the majority of people want this stuff. It just so happens it's never expressed whatsoever in our political paradigm. And so then it comes down to cultural issues, which are created by the wealth class in order to divide us and keep us from actually voting on the things that we actually want.
I hear you when you say the left doesn't exist. What you mean is it doesn't represent you in government. There aren't elected representatives who you feel that you identify with their politics. So what would you say to those who are considered furthest to the left in, say, the House or the Senate, the furthest progressive? What would you say is the daylight or difference between your views as a leftist, which I identify as well, but I mean, I'm not sure. I want things like this confuse people. So what's the difference between you as a leftist and the person in the House furthest to the left or the Senate?
Well, so for instance, I think one of the main drivers of why we're in the situation we are now is because going back to the late 1970s, early 1980s, there's been a consensus in politics called neoliberalism, which of course divides people because it's got the word liberal in it. But basically what happened was that tens of trillions of dollars were redistributed from the working and middle classes to the 1% of the population. History tells us when that happens, including in the United States, that the country becomes more and more anti-democratic. Corruption is everywhere. So instead of talking about fixing that and actually redistributing that wealth and reviving democracy, small d democracy, we have conversations that are about nibbling on the sides because the so-called left or center left is considered dangerous. So Bernie Sanders, for instance, who is a center left politician, right? All of a sudden, the things that he talks about, or even Elizabeth Warren talks about, like she is emerging as like one of the leaders of the progressive caucus within the Democratic Party. Those things are seen as too dangerous. So it ends up becoming a debate between the far right and the moderates.
Right.
So then if we're talking about programs, Pete, we're talking about margin testing. We're talking about, well, this group can do this or this group can do that, and you can do this or you can do that. But it's all about moderating that idea. So basically, that concentrated leftism that people are actually desperate for, which the Republican Party has taken advantage of. Josh Hawley, J.D. Vance, and even Donald Trump are putting out leftist ideas that they don't believe in order to capture some of the energy we're talking about. So effectively, it changes the way our politics works and puts us on like a real path to failure.
What are the ideas that they are supporting that have been historically supported by leftists or would be now?
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not going to recommend that people go listen to speeches by J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley. My God. But basically, they are giving the way that it works is that they give the actual diagnosis of what has happened. So if you
Right.
listen to Hawley or you listen to Vance or even your old buddy Steve Bannon, your old stablemate, basically
Oh,
what they say is that the wealthy in this country have rigged things in their favor, which has hurt everybody else, and that we
right.
need a reinvigoration of everything from manufacturing to a government that actually helps the
Mm.
people. The problem, and we've seen this with everything from fascism to earlier authoritarian movements, is that the far right recognizes that there is a vacuum there, that people are not being spoken to and they're not being given solutions that actually address their problems. So they do it in how do I say this in a charitable way? A less than honest solution, right? Which is that J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley, Donald Trump are controlled by the wealth class who created this problem in the first place. And what they do is that they take that anger and they redirect it from the wealth class to people of color, women, the poor, labor unions, all of the
Right.
people that they oppose, and they redirect that anger and then use it for their own purposes.
Well, you said it one way. I say it a little bit differently. I know exactly what you're saying now, which is they identify a problem, in this case, wealth concentration at the top, but the solution for it is an insidious, corrupt, maybe
Yeah.
racist, maybe it's a wrong solution. They blame the wrong causes. They look at the problem,
Yes.
wealth concentration, and then they blame all the wrong issues. Instead of the deregulation of the financial industry, they blamed poor black people buying homes they couldn't afford.
Right.
Which,
Immigrants buying homes, which is one of
right.
the wildest
Or
assertions
second
that they've made.
homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay. Let me get back to where we're at now, though. I mean, by the way, did you answer? I feel like you didn't. What's the difference between you and, say, Bernie Sanders? I've been paying a lot of attention to his policies and his comments lately. And I just think the thing about Bernie that people both are annoyed by
Sure.
and that is both effective is he's been saying a lot of the same things over and over and over again, to the point where you see him on, say, Meet the Press yesterday. I was surprised by his reaction to the drones, which was hilarious. I don't know if you saw it, which was I don't know. I don't care.
He doesn't care.
I guess I'm worried. But he went off on, billionaires and millionaires and all of that. And so I feel like he's really effective. I don't disagree with him on most policy ideas. What about you?
Well, okay. So I don't know how much time we have, but I think this is actually an important topic. So here's what I want to say, Pete, which is I think that Bernie Sanders is right on a lot of issues, but
Mhm.
he's also been in Congress for so long that he has become an institutionalist. He
Yes.
attempted twice to win the nomination of the Democratic Party. Whether you can argue whether or not he had the votes to do so, whether or not he could have won the presidency. You can also point out that the Democratic Party as an institution didn't want it and that they closed ranks and kept him from being able to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So on top of that, Bernie Sanders has missed a lot of what actually needs to happen. And if this needs to be my closing remark and in terms of where my focus is and where my energy is,
Mm.
we cannot rely on this political class or media class to save us. We have been told that don't worry, they've got it taken care of. The lawsuits are going to take care of it. The next election is going to take care of it. You name it. The concentration of wealth has led to a corruption of representative democracy in the United States of America. What has to happen now is that individuals are going to have to form their own coalitions to put pressure on the political process and start to push back against this stuff. Bernie Sanders has talked about doing it within the halls of power. He's been effectively quarantined and made unable to do that, and it doesn't seem like he's particularly interested in forming those coalitions. When it comes to what we actually need to do, we need to look back to the progressive era, we need to look back to the civil rights era, the social revolutions of feminism, gay rights, you name it. The problem is that we as individuals are going to have to do the work. We're going to have to form with other people, we're going to have to engage in solidarity, and we're going to have to put pressure on the system from the outside.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. It's a hard road. It isn't easy, but it's kind of fun. Engaging in solidarity is fun. I've created this amazing community of people, and it's my favorite thing in the world. And we've come together in this time that you and I have been discussing and trying to just support each other while we support different ideas and politicians and solutions, talk about it all. It's great. Solidarity can be fun.
At the risk of being too sentimental, some of the things that have given me the most pleasure has been engaging, for instance, with your community, the Muckrake community, which we've formed, me and Nick Houselman. Like, I want to point out that in these times of darkness, and I'm sure you've seen it, a lot of people have given over to nihilism and doomerism. There's nothing to do. I'm done with it. There's a reason why MSNBC and CNN's ratings have absolutely plummeted, which is the spectatorship of politics in the United States of America. We've been sold a bunch of lies by a bunch of quote unquote resistance grifters. The truth is, when you meet other people and you see them as human beings and you form a core with them, not only do you find the replenishment and the energy that you need, but you actually start to form things that can get things done, which is not relying on people to take care of things for you anymore. You're taking care of them. The problem here is there's a lot of danger in that, Pete. And that danger is growing by the day, and it will get even worse under a second Trump administration. But it's the only way out of this thing, is to actually form communities and engage in active solidarity.
Yes, history has taught us that the only way out is through it. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
right. What is the white male fascist pipeline besides my new band, which is playing at CBGB's on Thursday?
Yeah, they're going to be there with the Fugazi reunion, right? No, so basically what has happened here, and this is one of the most misunderstood thing, and in the fallout from the 2024 election, you're hearing everybody say, we need our own Joe Rogan, or we need to start appealing to white men or whatever. What's actually happened in this country is white men are aggrieved. And part of the reason that they're aggrieved and that they've become more and more radicalized is a cultural reaction. They're pissed off that Marvel movies, Star Wars movies, entertainments have started to market to women and people of color and LGBTQ people. So they feel like something's been taken from them because they've been alienated from the political process. So in effect, because their fantasies, corporate produced fantasies, have been impinged upon, they feel as if the world is being taken out from them. This has had almost a one-to-one effect with so-called replacement theory, the idea that they're being replaced and gotten rid of by the Democratic Party, liberal elites, the deep state, whatever you want to say. So basically, at this point, because our politics have been so consumerized, what products you buy are then your what products you buy are then your politics. Right. They're having a reaction to their products changing, which has actually radicalized them. And this seems weird until you start to realize that fascist and authoritarian movements have also been reactions to things like jazz music, which in the past was supposedly a Jewish conspiracy to ruin the United States of America or Europe. And so it is basically a consumer reaction that has been capitalized on by the wealth class and the authoritarian movement we're talking about.
Who perpetuates it? Who's selling it?
Well, it's a combination of things.
I get some of this.
Well, so first of all, there's an ecosystem, and all of this has it's the people at the top, and then there's like this. It's almost like MLMs, right? So you have all these influencers and personalities. YouTube is a perfect place to go look at this. And basically, what you'll see is that it's a bunch of people who tell people, "Hey, you know why the new Star Wars movie didn't feel good? It's because it's woke indoctrination, and you have quote unquote woke corporations." If you remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene called it, what was it, communist corporations, which is a wild, wild thing to say out loud. But basically, it's a misunderstanding of capitalism, as we went back to Bannon and Hawley and Vance, that then redirects the anger from what corporations and the capitalist class is doing, and then puts it on gay people, black people, trans people, women, you name it. So it's basically a big redirection and radicalization project.
Communist corporation. If an
Communist
entertainment,
corporations.
if a movie studio like Warner Brothers made a movie that the plot was America turns from capitalism to communism successfully, and everybody loves it, everybody's happy, and there's flowers everywhere, and everybody's having sex and blueberry pie. If they made that movie and that movie made a lot of money for Warner Brothers, Marjorie Taylor Greene would still not have a point to say that these are communist corporations, because it's a private entertainment movie studio making hundreds of millions of dollars off of a movie.
Yeah, and basically
great,
what has happened is
they did it in a capitalistic way possible.
So after 2016, and I just want to put this into quick context, what happened after 2016 was very much a reaction to Donald Trump being elected president, in which you had a lot of people who wanted to feel better about their existences. So what happened? These corporations recognized a marketing opportunity. So what did they do? They started producing movies and TV shows and entertainments that reflected back what they believed were the political principles of the people buying them. They didn't care about this. And this is one of the reasons why but the idea that the Walt Disney Corporation wants to promote wokeness when they are one of the main drivers of conservative ideology and myth making in this country is a wild misunderstanding of things. It was an attempt, much like I always say Pepsi. And you and I are old enough to remember when Pepsi marketed itself as the choice of a new generation. It's sugar water, right? But it went ahead and marketed itself towards younger people to say, this is your cola. Right. It doesn't mean anything. It's a marketing opportunity. And the reaction to that has fueled a lot of the fascist right-wing momentum in this country.
Yeah. Well, now we've got what looks most like, I heard Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Chris Murphy both yesterday refer to, the incoming Trump administration as more like an oligarchy. You've got like several billionaires, and there's a lot of things that they want to do, but we're talking about different economic systems, and we're talking about different representation systems and kinds of democracy. But it's really what it is. It's going to be something that's new and original to the United States, but it has elements of current day countries and systems like Hungary and others, and systems long past failed and punishing and punitive, but it's going to be its own American kind of oligarchy is what it's going to look like, with all these billionaires with the hands on the government treasury, all the taxpayer money. They're just going to sell off America and dominate markets and tech bros. How does it look like? How do you describe what this new form of economic system and democracy is?
Well, I want to invite people, because the United States, living in the United States, sort of like perverts our understanding of this, because we're exceptional. Nothing could ever happen. So Pete, I want to point something out, and I know that you've seen this. I know your listeners have as well. Imagine you pick up the newspaper and you hear about some quote unquote second or third world country. There's been an election that got held, right? And the person who got elected is a total buffoon, a tin pot dictator figure. Everybody in America recognizes that he's under control by the corporations in that country, and when he gets in power, he's going to sell off all the resources. He's only going to become more and more of sort of a criminal. There's open corruption, all that stuff. We used to think that that was normal in other countries. Right. And we even engaged in it. The CIA engaged in like getting these people so that we could get their resources and labor. The problem is that project that the United States of America played a part in, it's come full circle. That's what we've got now. We have a president who is owned and basically controlled by billionaires like Elon Musk. And I brought up Blumenthal earlier. A lot of these Democrats, their strategy is to suck up to Elon Musk, almost like going into a feudal court and hoping that a baron or a lord will take favor with what you want. So basically what we're looking at is a situation that looks almost exactly like what we expect in so-called second and third world countries. We didn't expect it to come around to us, but it always boomerangs back, and that's where we are now.
Lots more to talk about with you. You've been writing a lot of great stuff over at your Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. I hope you have a good time at your cabin. Will you be taking some time off?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any time to be taken off. I think and this is actually a piece of advice I'd like to give people. you have to be very, very compartmentalized in
Yeah.
when you do what you need to do to prepare for the next administration, to organize, but also compartmentalize that stuff, put it away when you need to take some time for yourself. So it's going to be very sort of regimented, right? So like being able to like take time to take care of yourself. Now I'm going to do work. Now I'm going to take care of myself. Now
Right.
I'm going to do work. And that is unfortunately the job that we have to do from now on.
Yeah, I want to hear more about your process. That's exactly how I kind of see it and trying to manage my life as well. I bet you're going to be building fires. And when I look at you, I think you probably smell like a wood fire. I always think that's what you smell like, a wood fire.
I have worked very hard to smell like a mixture of fine woods and fires.
Yeah,
That is, and a little pine tar thrown in there.
yeah, that's exactly what I think you smell like, Jared. It's those.
Listen, I am nothing if not a caricature of my class. Like that's what I do. That's how I am. Let's roll with it.
It's funny. I mentioned that. Now I remember. I did. Last year in Vegas at Pod Jam, I did actually smell you, and it was straight Drakkar, which I was surprised by.
Oh, that must have been a remnant of my high school years where I was trying to be something that I wasn't. I'm shocked it wasn't a Hugo Boss or a Cool Water.
You were wearing a members only jacket. It was a weird. You were having.
How dare you? How dare you? This is a personal attack on me.
Just saying. That's all I remember. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to end the stream. I appreciate you doing this with me, buddy.
You're the best. Good talking.
All right. Go check out Jared's Substack right now, jaredyatessexton.substack.com. Thanks, everybody, for watching it live. And, of course, I'll post it for the podcast tomorrow. End stream.